No. 3. The Ghost Train. I was traveling through Europe in the late 90s with a friend of mine. We were backpacking and we had very little money. So when we found an excursion that was advertised as a 4-country tour for €400, we jumped at it. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. We were picked up in a van by a shady-looking man who spoke broken English. He then crammed us into the back of the van with 17 other people, mostly young women traveling alone. It reeked of stale waste and something dead. The driver told us that we would have a layover halfway through in Vienna, and before we knew it, we were speeding through the German countryside in near silence. When the driver finally stopped the van, he told us all to get out and stretch our legs and warned us not to go anywhere. He then went into some creepy detail about how Vienna was full of pickpockets and gypsies who would steal your soul if you let them. After using the bathroom, we all got back into the van and the driver sped off. We were barely out of town when the engine sputtered and died. The driver swore under his breath and started fiddling with the radio. We all stared at each other nervously. Some girl piped up and asked if we could just call a tow truck, but the driver shook his head adamantly and kept tinkering with the radio. Then he turned around, looked at us all and said, "Don't worry, I know a shortcut." We all knew he was lying, but what choice did we have? We followed him down narrow roads that seemed to go on forever until they finally opened up onto a dirt road. The driver then turned around and told us to get out. He pointed to a dilapidated old train station up ahead and told us all to meet back here in 1 hour. "Hurry up," he said, "or I won't wait for you." We all protested, but he ignored us and started walking away. When we arrived at the train station, it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It was overrun by weeds and the paint was peeling off the sides of the building. My friend and I decided to walk around the outside of the structure instead of going through the front entrance. As we made our way around, we came across a row of train cars that looked like they hadn't moved in decades. One of the cars was slightly ajar, and my friend and I looked at each other knowingly. We both wanted to get away from this place as fast as possible, and we figured that we could get to Vienna faster by train than by waiting around for the driver to fix his car. We quietly slipped into the train car, which was filled with trash and debris. It smelled faintly of decay and human waste. We didn't care. We just wanted to get out of there. Then we heard footsteps. We froze and listened intently. Footsteps, they were coming closer. Then we saw the silhouette of a man in the opening of the train car. He stepped inside and looked around wildly, mumbling to himself in a foreign language. My friend and I panicked and hid under a pile of trash and debris. The man began rummaging through the train car and we held our breath, hoping that he wouldn't find us. He eventually gave up and left the train car. We waited for what felt like hours until we finally dared to move. We snuck out of the train car and ran as fast as we could to the driver's van. We couldn't believe how stupid we had been, and we were worried that the driver would get angry with us for being late. When he saw us running towards the van, his eyes widened in surprise and he started yelling at us in his broken English. He told us that we were lucky because the train was haunted, and that anyone who stayed in the train overnight would die. He then sped off again, leaving us shaken but unharmed. We never did make it to Vienna. The driver ended up getting lost in the countryside and we spent the night sleeping in the back of his dirty van. In the morning, he drove us to the nearest gas station and dropped us off without saying a word. My friend and I hitchhiked the rest of the way to Vienna and vowed never to speak of the haunted ghost train to anyone ever again. 2. Hitchhiking horror. This happened in August of 2011 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. My girlfriend and I had just arrived in Buenos Aires after a week in Patagonia. We took the bus from El Calafate to be On the day we arrived, we checked into our hostel, dropped our stuff off and headed out to explore the city. We walked around for a few hours checking out the sights and sounds until we got hungry and decided to look for some food. We walked into a pizza place and ordered 2 slices of pizza and a couple of beers. While we were eating, we talked to the guy next to us who was from Ireland. He told us that he was planning on taking a bus up to Uruguay and asked if we were going anywhere near there. We told him that we were actually heading north towards the Brazilian border, and he asked if we could give him a ride. We didn't really want to, but we felt sorry for him since he was already drunk, and we didn't want him to end up getting mugged or worse. He agreed and we all piled into my rental car. The drive to the highway was pretty sketchy since the streets in Buenos Aires are really narrow and there are like 5 lanes of traffic in each direction. We made it to the highway and dropped him off and we continued on our way. About 20 minutes into the drive, my girlfriend and I started making out in the car. All of a sudden the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I got goose. I don't know how else to describe it. I turned to my girlfriend and told her that I had a really bad feeling about this and I wanted to turn around and go back to Buenos Aires. She said no and told me to stop being such a baby. So we continued on. About 10 minutes later, we heard a loud bang on the back of the car. We pulled over and got out to see what had happened. There was a flat tire. As I was getting the spare out of the trunk, I noticed that there was also a duffel bag in the trunk that wasn't there when we left Buenos Aires. I was freaked out because the only thing that could fit in that duffel bag was the guy that we had picked up. I told my girlfriend to open the bag and she did. It was empty except for a pair of shoes. At that point I was scared out of my mind and we both wanted to get as far away from that car and that duffel bag as possible. We finished changing the tire and got in the car and drove as fast as we could to the next gas station. As we were driving, we kept glancing nervously over our shoulders in case the duffel bag was somehow walking behind us. When we finally reached a gas station, we stopped and got out. We didn't even bother to fill up the gas tank, and we practically ran to the attendant to ask him to take the car off our hands. He didn't seem to mind, and he agreed to drive the car back to the rental place for us. My girlfriend and I got in his car and drove off. We never looked back. To this day, I still wonder what was in that duffel bag. And now for number 1. But first, it's merch shoutout time. No one lost in the Alps. In July of 2011, while hiking in the Austrian Alps, I became separated from my group. I was 17 at the time and quite cocky, so I decided to hike ahead of the group and show them how fast I could get to our destination. Unfortunately, I got lost. As I continued to hike, the sun began to set, and I knew that I needed to find somewhere to stay the night. That's when I saw a small cabin nestled in the trees. I made my way over to it and found that it had a locked gate, but the door was unlocked. I stepped inside and found a single bed and a dusty old table. I decided to make myself comfortable and wait until morning to see if anyone showed up. As I was settling in, I heard a knock on the door. I froze and listened intently. Someone was out there. I slowly made my way to the door and peered through the window. I couldn't see anything except for the trees swaying in the wind. I decided to ignore whatever was out there and went back to the table to wait for morning. At some point during the night, I woke up and needed to use the bathroom. I walked over to the door and hesitated. I could hear a faint noise coming from outside. I couldn't make out what it was, but it sounded like someone was trying to get in. I decided to venture out anyway and made my way over to the outhouse. As I approached it, I could hear the sound more clearly now. It was definitely someone trying to break in. I quickly backed away and ran back to the cabin. I locked the door behind me and huddled in the corner. Whatever it was outside the cabin continued to try and break in, banging on the door and kicking at the walls. I don't know how long I spent huddled in that corner, but eventually the commotion outside the cabin slowly came to a halt. I never did see whatever it was that was trying to get into the cabin, but I'm glad that I never did. Thanks for watching. Do you have a scary travel story you'd like to share with us? If so, be sure to follow the link in the description to submit your story. We might feature it on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a like. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.